So check it out. This is my Marshall Master Lead combo. The model number is 5010. These were based on the JCM 800 series, and they were made mostly in the 80s, 1982 through 91. 30-watt transistor amp with a terrible speaker in it. It's the Celestion G12M70, which they don't make anymore. It's 4 ohms, which was common in the 80s. Makes it hard to replace, but that'll be the next thing. But anyway, so I've had this thing since early 90s. I bought it used, so I actually don't know how old it is. There's a few different versions out there. There's black grill cloth on some of them, and sometimes these inputs are vertical instead of horizontal. Sometimes there's only one, and sometimes it doesn't have that extra line out. But the problem is that scratchy pots. So I need to pull this guy out and clean all these. Hopefully they can be cleaned back into service. If not, we have to replace them. So Marshall Master Lead Combo repair starts now. Okay, so I pulled the Marshall out from where it was at with everything else all connected. Unplug the power, and so here's the back of the thing, and it tells you 30 watts, blah blah blah. There's something you didn't know about me. I used the cabinet for a filing cabinet. No kidding. So yeah, like bipedals and stuff, receipts go in the back of the amp. I don't know why. Did that for years. I also keep cats on top of the amp for some reason, and I have an old cover. It's all yellowed and stuff, but totally, original Marshall equipment for covering this thing. I don't know if you got it moving out in the rain. Anyway, that's the amp. Gotta take this panel off, and the little kitty, come on, the little screws on top here. These guys get removed so that this can slide out this way, and then we can get to all the controls. 4 screws on the back. So back panel comes right off. That hasn't been removed in a very, very long time. I don't know if I've ever opened this up. Yeah, so there's the speaker I want to pull out. So anyway, yeah, these screws, and then I'll slide this guy out. Hey, so I have this side removed. You kind of have to support these things because these screws are all that's holding this thing in. It's kind of nice. The wood has a little, there's a tiny little nailer here that's partly to cover where the Tolex wraps, so it's behind this guy, but it also kind of prevents this from falling apart. So thank you, Marshall. So all my bolts have been removed from the top. Whoops, as you can see, that's loose in there. And this guy slides right out. The speaker is soldered in, and I just don't feel like undoing that. Hey, by the way, everybody, when you bust open your Marshall, keep in mind there are components like capacitors that will hang on to a lethal amount of current. So do be careful when you're fooling with some of this stuff. There is enough juice in here to kill you. And okay, a note for the fuse. So anyhow, that's the fuse. Yeah, so basically all these little holes in the potentiometers is where we squirt the contact cleaner that I'll show you in a minute. I'm going to do this with it still connected to the speaker because I'm lazy. But you can see that the bit of wiring in there is fairly neat. Not much. That's the transformer. That's the wiring to the switch. This little bit of wire that goes down through the bottom of the chassis here, that is the speaker wire. And yeah, this is DeoxIt D5. This I forget if I got it on Amazon, you know, StewMac, all the places that sell you guitar parts and stuff Sweetwater will sell you this. So in the past, I used a contact cleaner that I got at the auto parts store, which you figure cleaning contacts is the same, you know, electrons moving across metal. Well, some of those automotive types have oil in them, sort of as a lubricant, and this one does not have oil in it, so that's probably why you want to use something like DeoxIt. I'm just using rags. I could drag this down to the old workbench, but this is kind of an old carpet too, frankly. But yeah, so I'm just putting down some rags to pick up any excess. Of course, this is unplugged, but like I said, you could still have some voltages in there, so don't fool with any capacitors. And yeah, so let's get to cleaning. I'm just going to go down the line and clean every single potentiometer here. Mostly it was just a couple of them that were scratchy, but I mean, since we're here, right? So anyway, got my DeoxIt stuff, shake. So this right here is a little sort of an access point where there's a break in the metal. It doesn't look like it, but this is a little slot that I can get in. So the idea here is to just get this stuff directly in there. If I could get the camera to work properly. And excess is okay. This isn't like water that's going to destroy electronics. It's made for them. You do want to kind of work the potentiometer a little bit to work that stuff in there. And like I said, I'm okay with it dripping down. It's dripping down on more potentiometers that need to get cleaned. So that's fine. And, you know, keep extra rags handy to clean up excess. And that's it. I'm just going to go one by one, just like you saw. Spray a little bit, work it. Yeah, maybe dry up some of the excess that's just dripping here, because you know, I don't need a deluge. But yeah, so I'm just going to go one by one, plug it back in, see if I hear a difference, that it's cleaner, and give it some time to dry. And if I have to, come back to a second application. But mostly that's it. You're squirting cleaner into these little holes and working the pot, and hopefully it's doing its magic. Worked the cleaner through all these pots and gave them all a good twist. Completely lost all my settings, but it's okay. So yeah, I'm just going to give this a few minutes for this stuff to dry. Yeah, you can still feel it on there, and it's definitely in there. I mean, it dries pretty quick. And again, I'll just go through and give everything just a little wipe down for any excess. But like, you know, there's not a big puddle of this stuff down here. Really not. And I was pretty liberal spraying this stuff. So, you know, it evaporates, does its thing. That's kind of all there is to it. So like I said, give it a few minutes. Then I'll plug it in, turn it on, and just see if I get scratchy noises. I don't even have to plug a guitar in. And yeah, if I still hear noises, I'll try cleaning it again. And if that doesn't work, then we replace these potentiometers. I found a place online. I forget if it was Amplified Parts. It might have been. They'll sell you a whole set of all these guys. You just plug in the Marshall model number, and they already know the value of every potentiometer. I mean, whatever, it's labeled, I can figure it out. And schematics are available online. I have them. If you want a copy, go ahead and put a note in the comments. I'll send it to you. That's fine. And that's it. Fixing your Marshall JCM 800 style Master Lead Combo Model 5010. That's the mouthful. And yeah, the next thing we'll do is change out that speaker, which is pretty easy. I've done before. Though it looks like I'll be cutting or desoldering those speaker wires and reattaching, and you know, whatever, I can resolder or put the little quick connect things. I don't care. It's all good. So here you go. So like I said, I let this dry for a little while so that this isn't, you know, full of contact cleaner. As good as it is, I have everything turned down to minimum. I have a guitar plugged in that's turned down to 0. I'm going to turn it on. And we see there's no smoke pouring out. Always a good sign when you first turn on your amp. Okay, so I'm going to turn up the guitar a little bit here, actually all the way. And as you may or may not remember, I was turning the preamp, that's the first one here, and the treble earlier, and it was noisy. So anyway, so let's turn up the preamp a little bit just so I get a tiny bit of something gain happening here. And I'll turn up the master to like 2 or 3. This is a Marshall, it's still kind of loud. So there you go. So when I turn up the guitar and I turn up the master, I absolutely do get sound. So turning up all the tone pots. Actually, if you want to just turn it up all the way, the old school Marshall way, right? Turn up the presence wherever I am. Might get a little shrill, but that's, you know, reasonably loud, and there's no scratching. Yes, when you turn this all the way up, it's again, it's supposed to be JCM 800 tone. Maybe it is. It's a little shrill, partly because of that their speaker that has to get changed out. But I'd say mission accomplished. That took out all the scratchiness. I can actually use the treble pot now without causing, you know, bleeding in people's ears, including mine. That was awful before, and now it's silent. So cool. Got to slide this back in, you know, unplug everything here, slide it back in, screw the chassis back together with the amp, and yeah, we'll come back later and change out that speaker. I'm going to see how this thing sounds. You know, again, it probably didn't change the tone, but took out all the scratchy noise. So that's step 1. And step 2 will be that speaker. So hello, everybody. A little bit of time has passed. This is the Marshall Master Lead combo. Again, back panel here is back on. I'm going to pull that off because, like I was saying, the next step is to change out that Celestion G12 M70, which has a bad reputation. Celestion no longer makes that speaker for a reason. So I'm going to replace that speaker right here. This is not a Celestion. It's an Eminence Texas Heat Patriot series. Just funny, the Patriot series, like, you know, all American, blah, 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 it has more of a British tone. So it kind of sounds Marshall-y. So that's what I'm going to put in the Marshall. So first thing you got to do is remove the back panel. Use 4 simple screws. So I have the back panel off. You can see the speaker. So the next thing, usually these wires pull off with like a friction connector that just like slides onto this guy. That's not what we have. These are soldered in place. So I have to get the soldering iron and, you know, heat up those solder joints to pull off the wires. And then, you know, all these screws, there's 4 screws that hold the speaker in. So, but first I got to undo the solder joint and then a couple of screws, and we put in the new speaker. And we're going to have to solder in the new one as well, because I just don't have, you know, we have bare wire coming out of here. I could, I guess, solder on these little connectors, but, you know, I think this is a one-time thing, so I'm just going to solder the wire. So here we are in the back of the cabinet, and I have my nice little Weller. It's got a light on it too, so I can see what I'm doing. So all we want to do is heat up the joint a little bit, and just enough. And you know what I didn't do? I should have some kind of protection in there so I don't have hot solder falling on the speaker cone. Let's do that. I just threw a rag in there, again, just to sort of protect the speaker cone in case any solder falls out of this thing as I'm undoing it. And yep, some of that hooked in there pretty good. Try not to block the camera with my arm here. again, I think you can see what we're doing here pretty good. And again, someone had it hooked in there, and our speaker wires are free. Okay, trying to find my screwdriver. We just removed these 4 bolts, and that's in there. Pretty easy to remove. So yeah, take out those 4 bolts, and our speaker will be free. Hopefully I can reuse these bolts. The last time I changed out a speaker, the frame, the metal frame, was thicker metal, and I had to get longer bolts. So we'll see. I've removed all the screws, and the speaker can come out. I left in the other back panel. I might have to take that out to get the new speaker in. That wasn't a great idea, but anyway, we'll see how this goes. All right, so here, my original speaker and the new one. I just wanted to say, like, pay attention to that, the impedance. This is 4 ohms. It was a more popular speaker in the 80s in combos like this one. So this is also a 4 ohm. Yes, I could have put an 8 ohm speaker in here. 8 ohm speakers are a little easier to find. However, it had cut the power in half. So, even though the 4 ohm speakers are harder to find, I found this Eminence Texas Heat. And notice 150 watts. I'm pretty sure this one is 70. I could be wrong, but I think it's a 70 watt speaker. But anyway, so I'll get more clean headroom, I believe. So anyway, I'm going to try and stick this in without pulling off the back panel, but I bet I will. Yep. So I removed that back panel, makes this a lot easier, and I'll be able to see where the holes are for the screws. So there you go. So I'm starting to put the speaker in, and I just laid the wire in. You can see here a little plus, a little minus. That's important. And so if you looked and paid attention previously, this is the old speaker. It's faint on there, but you can just barely make out a little plus terminal on the left and the negative on the right. So the polarity here on the new speaker is the same, plus on the left. So the red wire is positive, and because I know that's where it was before. So anyway, I'm just reconnecting the wires, and then we'll solder them. But that's an important detail, that you're on the correct polarity, positive and negative. Otherwise, the speaker is gonna, it'll work, but it just won't sound as it's supposed to. So the idea is to heat up the tab, the metal tab. And then you apply solder to the wire. And I'm hoping you can see this without me blocking the view here. See how we did. Those wires are soldered in. I just plugged it in. I haven't put the back on yet. I guess maybe I should vacuum that out. But I did plug in this guitar to the front here. So whatever, and it is on. And anyway, it's in, and I got sound. Anyway, so, but you can see on here that little mark by the 4 here. That's where I used to have my treble, and this was a very trebly amp. So again, I'm just like plugged in over here somewhere. It's set for kind of a clean tone, but anyway, that's the difference in treble and bass response. I still have the bass cranked, but I have way more treble in mids to compensate for all that bass. And with the old Celestion speaker, there was no reason to turn the treble past 5. It was super shrill and piercing. And again, you can see the presence. I have a little mark around 7, and I'm a little bit more like 8 now. So anyway, way better bass response. So much so that I've had to turn up the treble in this amp, which anyone who's heard this amp years ago would be quite surprised. I'm turning up the treble in the mids now. But anyway, I can tell you that for me anyway, for rock and roll in this solid state Marshall amp, that going from the stock Celestion G12M70 to a Eminence Texas Heat speaker, it absolutely makes a big difference. So yay, Eminence. And it's funny, again, it says, you know, for a great American tone on the speaker, but you know, to my ears, I get good Marshall clean here. Whatever, you can look up this amp again. You can see where I usually had the preamp gain at like 1, and now I have it much higher. I didn't typically use the preamp stage of this amp. I'd leave it clean and then get dirt with pedals. When you crank this thing up to 10, you do get some JCM-like distortion. But anyway, mission accomplished.